engineers on the project, so Stephen and Michael from Llewellyn Associates. Attending virtually are also the owner's representatives, Ibti Safi and Claudia Salgado, as well as Patty Graham, architect with SRM, and Greg Liu, our transportation lead from Paradigm Transportation. This isn't. So why am I here? Before you is a positive planning report, and while we agree on most aspects
I can't hear
as staff.
anything. Do you know that? That's why.
Sorry, we've been having some technical issues this morning. See if we can. Can I just check those that are virtually in this meeting? Are you able to hear us? Yes. Okay. Sorry, Elizabeth.
It's okay, I could continue. So I'll start over, but before you is a positive planning staff report, and while we agree on most of the aspects of the zoning bylaw presented before you, we are seeking a modification today to the holding provision. And that modification can have positive implications for the timing of development and when the city can expect housing units to come online. So before we get into the modification part, I do want to step back a bit. So through the zoning bylaw amendment process and the concept planning, we do agree with the proposed zoning bylaw amendment before the committee. And that amendment, just to be clear, provides for, firstly, residential intensification of the site, which would include apartment buildings and stacked townhomes. Rezoning of the site to the TOC 3, so the transit-oriented corridor 3 zone from agricultural along a potential higher order transit road. An 8-story apartment consisting of 210 units and 2 blocks of stacked townhomes consisting of a total of 10 units, so bringing us to a grand total of 220 housing units. Furthermore, the zoning bylaw amendment provides site-specific modifications to address minor rear yard setback changes and a minimum and maximum height change. But then a key modification to that we agree with staff on is the maximum height change from 22.0 meters to 26.5 meters at the greatest height. So overall with heights, the building does tier from 3 to 7 and then ultimately 8 stories. So the only issue we disagree with staff on is the limitation of the holding provision that is tied to the zoning bylaw amendment before you. It, in its current form, doesn't allow specifically for interim services. And therefore, we are here today requesting a modification to that in order to gain greater flexibility on the temporary service and connection, which Stephen and Michael will go into greater detail on. And that temporary servicing, I should mention, would be at the sole cost of the owners. So in terms of the options, the first option before you is the current state of the holding provision before the committee. So what that would mean, and as it's written, would be that the development on this site, so 81-87 Rymal, would have to wait for the future extension of DiCenzo Drive, as well as the applicant to the north and their future development and servicing plans. What we're proposing is an option 2, and which is a modified holding provision, and this would mean that development would not have to wait because a temporary or interim service connection would be allowed from an existing service connection and then to the site. It would also mean in the future, once the development of DiCenzo Drive and the extension of the services from the north to the site are complete, we would switch over to that longer term connection. And again, all the work that will be undertaken will be provided at the developer's cost. In terms of the rationale for option 2, as it stands, the future extension and therefore service provisions along DiCenzo Drive is uncertain, and especially in the short and medium term, we have reached out to the development proponent to the north several times to inquire about that timing and coordination. and unfortunately have not heard back. We understand that those lands to the north are currently vacant and proposed for future residential development. An ideal situation would be that this site would then be ultimately serviced from the north when that development would go through. However, again, the timing and the coordination is unknown. Therefore, why we're putting this option to you today. So currently, and again, Stephen and Michael will go into details with the engineering requirements. At the intersection of Tessa Drive and DiCenzo Drive, just there in yellow, services exist. So we propose to run temporary services from this intersection, so south towards the next intersection at Atessa and Rymel, and then along Rymel Road, ultimately to our site. And then at a future date, and when development plans are known to the north, we would connect to these longer-term services. So really, I should point out that due to the length of time of development approvals and construction at this time, as we are all well aware, and the ever-increasing cost to build, there's no desire to delay this project and this development proposal. Providing temporary services to the site will allow much-needed housing within the city and for it to be built sooner, specifically 220 units. I should mention again, once the adjacent lands are developed, all temporary service connections will be removed, again at the owner's cost, and then connected into the longer-term servicing arrangement. So with that, I will now hand it over to Stephen and Michael from Llewellyn to speak to the specific engineering and servicing requirements of the site.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. As Elizabeth had indicated, the site is awaiting future extensions along DiCenzo Drive to service it in the ultimate condition, which is to the north of the red rectangle. At this time, what we're proposing as an interim solution is to make connectivity to the water main and the storm sewer that currently exists on Rymel Road and have the sanitary extend from the site on Rymel Road westerly to Atessa and then partially down Atessa. There is existing sanitary on Atessa, so we don't need to extend all the way to DiCenzo. It would only be partially down the frontage of Atessa, as you see there. The red on the illustration is the sanitary sewer, blue being storm, and the lighter blue being the water main. Those are the existing conditions. As far as the temporary service, as I mentioned, the dashed red is the temporary sanitary that we'd connect to down Atessa and Rymel Road, and the light blue and dark blue are the storm and water main connecting directly to Rymel Road. In the ultimate scenario, the servicing will connect for the water main and storm to the extension of DiCenzo Drive once the adjacent development is ready to develop. Ultimately, the storm and sanitary, the storm and the water main would continue to connect to Rymel Road, and the sanitary that we would put in interimly would be abandoned and disconnected with that new sanitary service connecting to the DiCenzo Road extension. All of this, again, at the developer's expense. Thank you.
So I'll just end with this slide and take us back to the beginning. We do recognize the positive planning staff report, and we understand that they agree with the principle of the intensification of the site. There's also agreement with the density and the type, so the multiple dwellings and the townhouses for development. And again, what we disagree on is the lack of clarity or flexibility to provide interim servicing to the site at the owner's cost. This up here is the modified wording that we would request, and as you can see in light blue, bold, and underline, we're looking to add the option of having an alternative interim servicing scenario. And with this, it would still be subject to the city's approval, but will allow for more immediate development, and again, at no cost to the city. We respectfully ask the city to approve the proposed ZBA recommended by staff, but with this modified holding provision noted here. So that concludes my presentation, and our team is happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any speakers on the speakers list. I do have a couple questions. So if I could ask Councillor Wilson to please take the chair.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. So On the holding provision request, normally this committee wouldn't entertain a request like this on the floor. So if we were to consider that, would you be okay for this decision to be deferred to the next planning committee in January in order for us to have some of those discussions with staff and make sure that whatever the terms are adequate?
I think that could be appropriate, yes, through the chair.
And then I'll have to follow that up with staff as well to make sure that we don't run into any legislative requirements, return of fee or anything like that, because with the new application timelines, there's not a lot of wiggle room. So just as an option. Specifically on the request, I am sympathetic to the fact that this development can't proceed without the development of DiCenzo Drive, which is completely unknown and privately owned. So your group doesn't own the adjacent property. You have no influence over what happens with those lands.
Please confirm.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. So if we were to look at the requested temporary holding provision, I would want some guarantees that, A, that you're actually going to proceed with construction, and B, that the property, once rezoned, isn't going to be sold. So would you be amenable to those provisions?
So through the chair, that's something that we can take back and discuss with the owners.
Okay. And your timeline for construction, what would be reasonable to include with a temporary holding provision? Because I think we would want to put a specific timeline on when that is permissible.
Sure. Through the chair, if I may, if Claudia or IPTI are online, can clarify the potential phasing and construction timelines.
Thank you. Is there someone online that can join us? If not, it likely underscores the importance of discussion offline with staff to get these important questions answered. I don't see anyone.
Okay.
Chair,
I just have
Councillor?
one final question then, and as suggested, I mean, we have in the interim, we'll circle back after the holidays to have those discussions. My last question is that what would the method of construction be for the temporary servicing? Would we be open trenching in order to connect the sanitary?
Through the chair, most likely there would be open trenching to construct the sanitary. There may be options to do trenchless technology. We haven't explored it at the detailed stage yet.
Okay. You know, for another concern beyond just the holding provision, that section of Rymel and Atessa are relatively new, so obviously not ideal to have a new open trench on a, which introduces long-term maintenance issues for the city. So we'll need some assurances as well that the methods of construction, if we were to do that, that the methods of construction are appropriate, and the scope of work might be more than just, you know, a straight open trench, backfill and compaction. So that's something that we would have to discuss further. But anything else that you wanted to add on the request? Nope.
No, that would be all.
Okay.
thank you. Chair's
Thank
back
you.
to you.
So then I need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation from the proponents. Moved by Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Tattison. All in favor or opposed? Councillor Pauls, are you able to vote? Yes. That carries unanimously. On to the public meeting. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.3? This is application for zoning bylaw amendments for 81 and 87 Rymel Road East. Seeing no one in chambers, no one online. A second time, any members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.3, 81 and 87 Rymel Road East. And a third and final time, any members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.3, 81, 87 Rymel Road East. Seeing no one in chambers, no one online. I don't believe there were any public submissions. So therefore, we are going to close the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson. Okay, that the public submissions regarding this matter were received and considered by the committee. Sorry, it's the line above. I have to put in voting. That there were no public submissions received. There we go. It's before the or. Okay, so that there are no public submissions received regarding this matter and that the public meeting be closed. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by myself. All in favor or opposed? And I believe we did hold a public consultation meeting and there was no attendance either. Although I got all the donuts for me. Councillor Nan, are you able to vote? That carries 9-0. So on the report with the report recommendations, to put this on the floor, and then I will table a referral motion or a deferral motion. We just go to the deferral? Okay. So maybe I'll hand the chair over to Councillor Wilson again.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. So just a couple comments first on the actual application. If this would have came forward 5 years ago, I probably would have been opposed to it. A lot has changed since then. 210 new residential units, an 8-story building with 10 stacked townhomes. This is the kind of missing middle infill development that we are trying to promote as a city. The density and the scope of this on the size of the lot is a little bit higher, a little bit more than previously I probably would have been supportive of. But I've had lots of conversations with our planning staff and also with the proponents, working towards more family-friendly units, a bit greener development. So I don't have any issues with the current proposal that's before us. I'm very much in favor of what is being proposed for that site, which brings us to the holding provision. And this site is somewhat unique in the fact that we have a property owner developer that is, willing to move forward with 200 to 210 new residential units, some stacked townhomes, which is needed, but they can't proceed because of a provision of a holding provision in the approval that ties their development to an adjacent property which they have no control over. And just having a little bit of insight into the adjacent property owners, it's not known when, if ever, at least within our planning timelines, those properties will come online. So I am very much in favor of finding a solution that will, a temporary holding provision, a solution that will allow them to proceed with this development, provided that there's, as was discussed earlier, there's provisions of actually holding them to a specific timeline for construction, and that once the zoning is in place, that the land isn't going to be sold, so that it would be non-transferable, and also consideration of what the construction methods would be, how it's actually going to be done, and that we're not creating long-term issues for for the city if we were to grant that provision. I know we have had some preliminary discussions with staff. Growth management staff currently are not very keen on this idea, but I would appreciate the bit of extra time to go back and have those discussions specifically with growth management staff. So with that, I'd ask for a deferral to the January meeting, January 16th, Planning Committee meeting, if somebody would like to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. I always get confused about this part. Are members allowed questions on the deferral, referral? Looking to Kelsey for some instruction.
Yes, but I suppose it depends on what the questions are. The
I have-
question should be fine, just not
Yeah.
debate, I suppose.
Yeah. I have a question. But I have to give up the chair to my colleague.
Apologies, I promoted Councilor Maureen Wilson to Vice Chair of Planning, but apparently she's not.
Thank you. I am sympathetic to the ward councillors, both the context, and I think this committee's genuine commitment to getting units onto the market and getting units that are within that middle, particularly within that missing middle, thank you, context. But there was one item that you flagged, Councillor Danko, in your communication with the applicant's representative, and it would help me if better understanding those timelines that you referenced and the penalties that are applied to the municipality when we don't meet that schedule of approval. If I could ask through the acting chair, if in referring this, is there any risk that we would be there'd be a tripwire in so doing? Would we be penalized for going past the approval framework? Thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, Anita Fayback, Director of Development Planning. This application was deemed complete in November of 2022, so the Bill 109 legislation, which is the fee refunds, would not apply.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. I'll assume the chair back. So, folks, we have something on the floor. Are there any further questions on the intent or the substance? Seeing none, we'll vote. Councillor Crutch.
Councillor Pauls, can we get your vote, please?
There, thank you very much. Passes 8-0. Over to you. Thank you, Chair.
This is an increase to building permit fees. George Catano is available. Sorry. So we're just going straight to any comments on, okay. So we are going to ask if there's any members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.4, which is the proposed building permit fees. I'm not seeing anyone in chambers, no one online. Second time, item 10.4, any public comments on the proposed increase to building permit fees? And a third and final time, no members of the public wish to speak to item 10.4, the proposed increase to building permit fees. So therefore, I need a mover and a seconder that there were no public submissions received. I don't believe there's anything on the agenda either, and that the public meeting be closed. All in favor or opposed? Oh, sorry, moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Beatty. That carries unanimously. And then on the report, moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Tattison. On the report recommendations to approve, is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none? All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Item 11, discussion. Item 11.1 is the Farm 911 Emergency Access Point Programs, which impacts wards 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 15. Does committee wish to see the staff presentation? No? Okay. So we don't need a motion to waive the staff presentation? Okay. So then we're going to go straight to the report and the recommendations. Mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations. Moved by Councillor McMeekin, seconded by Councillor Beatty. Any discussion? Seeing none?
Oh,
Sorry, Councillor Tattison?
I just want to thank Heather Travis and Tyson McCann for all the work that they did to resurrect this. It was lost during COVID. They picked it up and ran with it. This is very important in the sense that it's based on the Emily Project, which is based on a young lady who died while waiting for emergency vehicles to access the rural field. They couldn't find it. So this is going to help improve safety in our rural areas of our city. So again, thanks so much for staff for following up and bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further speakers, so all in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. On to item 11.2. This is the staging of development report from 2024 to 2026. Does the committee wish to see the staff presentation? I would suggest yes. Not seeing a lot of enthusiasm, but okay. Heather Travis, please.
Thank you. My name is Heather Travis, and I'm the manager of the Legislative Approvals and Staging of Development section in the Growth Management Division. And I'm pleased to present to you today the Staging of Development Report 2024 to 2026. So what is staging of development? The Staging of Development Report is a requirement of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan. Traditionally, it has been prepared on an annual basis, but there's been a bit of a hiatus since the preparation of the last report in 2019 due to challenges with COVID interruptions and staffing capacity. So the primary purpose of the staging report is to identify anticipated development over the next 3 years with a focus on approval and servicing of draft plans of subdivision. The report also provides information on infrastructure requirements to support growth, which informs the city's capital forecast. New this year, the report is also identifying potential significant residential intensification projects, which may occur in the short, medium, and long term. Mapping is provided by geographic area of the city to provide an overview of anticipated development projects in each area. And finally, the report does include input from the development community to assist staff in identifying forthcoming projects in the near term. So as mentioned, the staging report has traditionally provided information on draft plans of subdivision at different stages in the planning process. In particular, the report provides timing information on draft plans of subdivision that have not yet been draft approved, as well as those that have already been draft approved and are working towards servicing approvals. So for those subdivisions that have not yet been draft approved, as noted on the slide, these are the draft plans that are still under review by city staff and have not yet been considered by council. No approvals have been granted, and so they're earlier in the planning process. Development on the ground is likely still several years out. For the subdivisions that have already received draft plan approval, so these are the ones that are considered draft approved, and applicants are actively working on clearing conditions of approval, working toward registration of the draft plan and installing services. So development could be considered nearer term for these plans. So just before we get into the staging plan that's identified in the report, I just want to reiterate that the timing identified in the staging report represents a best estimate on the part of staff for anticipated timing of draft plan approvals and servicing approvals. Several factors can impact the proposed timing of draft plan approval and servicing, including unexpected issues or concerns arising during application review, delay on the part of applicants to respond to concerns or provide updated studies, staffing and workload challenges, legislative changes, economic factors, or other priority applications needing attention. So the timing outlined in the report is subject to change and does not represent a guarantee that applications will be approved, nor that they will be brought forward in the time identified. So the recommended staging plan identifies the timing as shown on the screen for anticipated approval of draft plan of subdivision applications, which are currently in process but have not yet been draft approved. So we've identified 18 draft plans for potential approval by the end of 2023 or 2024. 5 draft plans for potential approval in 2025, 6 for potential approval in 2026 or beyond, 2 with no timing identified, and 9 draft plans which are currently before the Ontario Land Tribunal and for which timing would be dependent on the outcome of the tribunal proceedings. So for these draft plans, which are summarized on the previous slide, the table on this slide indicates the total residential units and industrial or commercial floor space that could be approved through these draft plan applications. In total, the applications under review represent approximately 11,100 residential units and more than 850,000 square feet of industrial or commercial space. And now looking at the draft plans which have already received draft plan approval. So just a reminder, these are the plans that have already been draft approved and are working through the clearance of conditions and ultimately towards servicing and registration of the plan. These are the plans that are further along in the process and may see development occurring in the nearer term. The recommended staging plan identifies that 26 approved draft plans of subdivision could be expected to proceed to servicing in 2024. 9 could be expected to proceed in 2025, 8 to proceed to servicing in 2026 or beyond, 6 with no timing identified, and 2 draft plans that are dependent on the outcome of related Ontario Land Tribunal proceedings. So for these draft plans that were summarized in the previous slide, the table indicates the total residential units and commercial and industrial space that could be approved through the servicing review of these plans. And as you can see, we have approximately 5,900 residential units which could be approved through these plans and about 445,000 square feet of commercial and industrial space. So in sum, focusing just on the residential units now, the total anticipated residential units that could be realized through the approval and servicing of draft plans of subdivision is approximately 17,000 units, as shown on the table. And some interesting notes from this table, the unit mix amongst the units anticipated to be serviced, so those plans that have already received draft plan approval, is more skewed toward lower density dwelling forms, singles, semis, and towns. These are the units which could see construction and occupancy in the near term. The unit mix of the draft plans, which have yet to receive draft plan approval, is more skewed toward the higher density dwelling forms, with 8,700 proposed apartment units through these draft plan applications. And just to reiterate once again, the numbers represent total potential unit approvals through in-process draft plan of subdivision applications and servicing reviews. As noted, due to multiple factors, there's no guarantee the units will be approved or that approvals will occur within the timeframes identified in the staging report. So for the first time this year, the staging report has included information on potential residential intensification developments. Traditionally, the staging report had focused on approvals through draft plan of subdivision, which primarily occur within greenfield or previously undeveloped areas of the city. The inclusion of the residential intensification numbers recognizes the importance of intensification projects in contributing to the city's future housing supply. Part of the reason that intensification projects had previously not been included is that it can be very difficult to predict not only where intensification will occur, but also when. So to assist with identifying these potential intensification developments, staff queried development applications with the following criteria as noted on the slide. Those applications that proposed residential or mixed-use development, those applications proposing 100 or more residential units, again, because the focus was on significant intensification projects, applications that were submitted in the previous 3 years and located anywhere within the existing urban boundary, but outside of a plan of subdivision application. The timing assumptions for when intensification may occur were applied based on the type of development application under consideration. So site plan applications that are currently in process, but for which a building permit has not yet been issued, were identified as a short-term potential development timeframe. Official plan and zoning amendment applications that are in process but had not yet proceeded to a site plan application are a medium-term timeframe. And formal consultation applications, again, that are in process or had not yet proceeded to a full Planning Act application were a long-term timeframe, really with no potential timing identified for those applications. And this timing is really based on the level of potential certainty with the types for each type of application. Formal consultation applications have a low level of certainty regarding whether or not an applicant or owner will proceed to a full application or when that future full application may be submitted. So they're therefore deemed to be long-term intensification potential in light of that timing uncertainty. So in sum, the total number of potential intensification units identified over the 3 periods is approximately 18,100 units could be created in the short term through site plan applications, approximately 14,600 in the medium term through zoning applications, and approximately 17,000 in the long term through FC application, formal consultation applications. So again, as you can see highlighted in red here, it is very difficult to predict when and where intensification will occur. Inclusion of applications in the staging report does not indicate a guarantee of approval of the applications that are under review. And further, approval of an application does not guarantee that an applicant will proceed to the building permit stage. So it's not anticipated that all of the units identified in the staging report will be realized, and for those that do proceed to development, it's not expected that all will proceed within the indicated timeframes. The intensification numbers have been included for information purposes only in recognition of the significant role that intensification will play in the city's future housing development. Finally, the staging report also provides information on infrastructure to support growth. The Staging of Development Program assists in the development of a comprehensive multi-year capital works program in order to ensure adequate infrastructure is in place to support growth in the city. Although development charge fees generally pay for growth-related infrastructure, developers are also responsible for a share of the cost of that infrastructure that serves their development. And the Staging and Development Report identifies a list of development charge-funded capital projects included within Table 8 of the full report. And just to finish up, I want to draw committee's attention to the mapping that's included in the staging report. The screen shows one example of the mapping included, this one being Ancaster, but mapping of all urban areas across the city has been included. The map highlights the proposed development within each of the areas, including both draft plans of subdivision and residential intensification projects. The tables on the map identify proposed developments, including the total proposed units and floor areas and the potential timing associated with each application. And thank you very much, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions from committee? I do have a couple as well. I'll go to Councillor Tattison.
Not sure if this is an appropriate question, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Do any of the properties that you're talking about, do they lie outside of the city's renewed, more restrictive urban boundary that we just kind of passed?
Through the chair, there are a couple of subdivisions that are located within the rural settlement areas in Flamborough. Those are already approved subdivisions. But in terms of, are there any applications that are located within the urban boundary expansion areas that were previously approved by the province? No, there's no development included within those areas within this report.
Okay, I'll rest at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure I understand what's being delivered here. Is this telling us anything, through the chair, to Ms. Travis about our capacity to hit the provincial housing targets as set out publicly?
Through the chair, so that's not the primary purpose of this report. No, this report is really meant to be a tool that's really utilized by staff and also the development community in identifying workload priorities and when development is expected to proceed. There is a separate report that's going to be brought forward by the Planning Division in 2024, Housing Monitoring Report, which is going to, among other items, look at the city's progress in meeting different housing and other provincial targets.
Okay, thank you. My second question, it's referenced in the report, and you did allude to it in your presentation, that the units are skewed towards lower density, but then you're seeing then a move to a unit mix of that have yet to receive draft plan approval to higher density. And I think you said it was interesting, and I wanted to know if you wish to unpack that adjective. Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, I think it's indicative of seeing the development community start to respond to different policies that we have in place, encouraging higher density development and some of the more missing middle development. So, some of the draft plan approvals, those plans that have already been approved and are working towards servicing, they've been approved for quite some time. So that's under a bit of a different policy regime and different focus that the city has now on intensification. So I think it's interesting and encouraging to see the newer plans come forward that are responding a little bit more to that higher density dwelling form, as it's in line with the city's focus on encouraging that type of development.
Thank you. Just one final question then on that point, through the chair. Agree, it is encouraging, and they're responding to, but just so I understand, the elements or the policies that are having the greatest influence in impacting that, is it more local as opposed to provincial, or is it a combination thereof? What are the most determining factors on that? Through the chair, and that's my question.
Through the chair, I mean, that's an interesting question. I guess, suggest it's our local official plan policies that are the most influential when reviewing applications. But I think it's, those official plan policies take our direction from the provincial planning policies. So I think it's a bit of a package of both. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I can just add some additional information for committees. Over the last 20 years, the amount of vacant land within the city's urban area has actually decreased from 3,900 hectares to 1,200 hectares. At the same time, over the last 20 years, we've added approximately 30,000 new households to the city of Hamilton, and our total unit supply has increased by 10,000 units through the densification initiatives that have been brought forward and adopted by this committee and council. So the previous Places to Grow plan that the province had released and the Greenbelt plan, that set the policy framework that enabled us to bring forward those enabling official plan policies and zoning regulations. So we are seeing that a marked shift within the city of Hamilton, where vacant land and traditional greenfield development is becoming less and less of an component of our overall housing supply. And it's much more focusing on the densification and the reurbanization efforts is where we are able to increase the supply. So that is one of the things that we are going to be working on and monitoring on the housing report. Really looking less about land supply or land needs assessments and focusing a lot more on housing needs assessments, ensuring that we're providing that full continuum of housing, both in terms of unit type, single semis, rows, apartments, and looking at tenure considerations as well. And thirdly, protecting our housing supply in terms of rental housing protection, condominium conversion, and demolition replacement. That is the overall sort of no urban boundary growth management strategy. And that, I think, is a marked, it's very significant, the fact that we are increasing the supply at the same time we are seeing high levels of development activity within the city of Hamilton through the council's adoption of those densification initiatives, and whether that be, from the accessory dwelling units and doubling the number of units within an existing single or semi-detached dwelling to the other end of the continuum, such as we did in the downtown secondary plan, where we pre-zoned it for mid and high-rise buildings and also along the LRT corridor in our major commercial areas. And we are starting to see more and more the development industry is responding to that sort of planning framework that's been put in place, with less and less emphasis on greenfield development in terms of accommodating our future housing needs. And I think the next sort of piece of the puzzle is last week the Minister of Municipal Affairs reconfirmed his commitment to bringing forward a use it or lose it legislation or framework. We don't, in an urban context, that'll be different than in a greenfield context. But I anticipate, based on the dialogue at the Housing Summit last week, that the province is really serious about bringing forward some sort of policy framework, because they have heard from municipalities. The key to sort of maximizing the land supply then is unlocking those subdivisions or those areas that are effectively, to use a healthcare analogy, they're bed blockers, where somebody is holding up another development. And the one we had on Rymel Road earlier today was sort of an indication of that, where development could proceed should those previous planning approvals proceed. So that is going to be the next conversation, I think, with the province. And they seem to be very keen on this idea of use it or lose it in order to unlock housing supply opportunities within all municipalities across Ontario. Thank you very much.
So, Chair, that's very encouraging to hear, and I very much appreciate that context, and would just underscore that policy matters, intentionality matters, and I think we began this conversation at the beginning of this term, Chair, talking about the thousands of approved hectares in this province that are just sitting there stale, and so put me in the championship, the champion column of use it or lose it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Seeing no further first-time speakers, so I'm going to put myself on the list. So Councillor Maureen Wilson, if you could take the chair again.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. And carrying on that discussion on, where we're going in the use it or lose it policy, and I'm really looking forward to the housing monitoring report as well. So this might be a little bit of overlap, but I'm going to ask this question now. So I think the example of 8187 Rymel that we just saw was a perfect example of a development that would be approved for rezoning, but would effectively be frozen for actually building. And we're seeing in the development industry right now, the pro formas are kind of borderline, and there's a huge gap between actual housing starts that were being measured by the province and the approvals that we are, working towards. So from the municipal perspective and seeing everything that's in this report, are there ways that we can make sure that these developments actually get shovels in the ground in a timely manner? Is that part of staff's work plan to review our own internal processes?
Senior Planner Travis, would you like?
Through the chair, I can start, and then perhaps Mr. Robichaud would like to elaborate. from staff's point of view, certainly we do everything we can to expedite and grant the approvals in a timely manner and be flexible and open-minded and kind of thinking out of the box to ensure that we get approvals granted. In terms of requiring or forcing an application to go from that approval stage to the building permit stage, that's always been the problem and that stumbling block, and why, you know, our approval numbers reflect higher than what we actually see on the ground. So I hadn't heard about the use it or lose it legislation that Mr. Robichaud was talking about, but I think that would be the tool that the municipality would be looking for, and that would give us that teeth that we require.
Okay.
Through to Madam Chairman, to the council, the short answer is yes. There's actually a current initiative going on right now that's being led out of the general manager's office in conjunction with the city manager's office with the Bloomberg Group, and looking at how do we empower staff at the front line to make those key decisions. I think one of the goals and objectives is to ensure that development approvals from conception to building permit stage happens within an economic cycle, so that we don't run into those situations where economic shocks delay projects. And a major, one of those initiatives is empowering staff to make timely decisions, combined with proactive planning through the infrastructure master plans and pre-zoning sites, so that we get development as close to shovel-ready as possible, as well as having that full continuum of housing opportunities within the city. So some of the larger projects may be held back because of the interest rates issues, but there are some of the smaller scale projects we're seeing the entrepreneurs are bringing forward, and that may be simply of repurposing underutilized commercial space, where we're seeing along Main Street areas, looking at opportunities within existing parking lots that are serviced, so it's essentially just straight to building permit in some cases, as well as then working with our growth management and public works colleagues, so that when people come in, they get a complete picture of what's required to allow their development to advance, and they can move it forward. Historically, what we have seen is when we do get an economic slowdown, people want to be the first out the gate, so they spend a lot of time right now in the pre-planning, pre-engineering work, so they have all the development approvals in place. They may just hold off on actually applying for a building permit until they have a bit more certainty in the economy, and then moving forward, they would move quite quickly, and I anticipate that's what will happen when we sort of come out of this current economic slowdown going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One follow-up question and an example. So looking at all the projects in the list and the timelines, not every property owner, not every developer is equal. There are some that have a very positive track record of actually moving forward with their projects. Some that have a reputation of just kind of sitting on approvals, and then some that are just going through the approval process so that they can increase their land value, flip that, and that is their business model. So as an example, in this report for 2026 and beyond is the villages of St. Elizabeth Mills, which is identified as 1,131 apartments, 73 towns. I believe it's over 20,000 square feet of commercial space. So it's a major infill to seniors-oriented development with an owner that is dedicated to building as soon as they possibly can. But they're still having challenges working through the approvals process. So is there part of our work plan on the city side to actually identify owners that are good quality builders that are committed to actually getting shovels in the ground and prioritizing and working with those owners to get work that we know can proceed as soon as possible actually proceeding?
Senior Planner Travis, would you like to?
So yeah, through the chair, again, I'll start, and if anyone wants to add anything. I think one of the kind of unique features of the staging of development report is that these lists are prepared in conjunction with the development industry. So we as staff prepare a list of where we think the projects are at, potential timing, knowing potential roadblocks that might be in the way, other issues. We prepare a list, but then we at the same time send a survey out to all of the applicants and the agents that are listed in all of these applications, and we solicit from them the same information. What do you think is your proposed timing? When do you see yourself going forward? And then we're able to look and see if those lists match up. And there are cases where we have developers or applicants say, we're ready. We don't think it's going to be 2025. We think 2024, we're going to be ready. This is where we anticipate being. So then we go back as staff and have those conversations and regroup and say, is that realistic? Can we bump this one forward to put it on higher up on the list, knowing that they have incentive and desire to move forward? So I think certainly that does come into play in this application. So that's a way of acknowledging and working with applicants who are ready and further along in the process and have a desire to go forward. Of course, so that being said, there's applications like the St. Elizabeth Mills that there are issues that have to be worked out regardless of how anxious and how much of the desire there is on the part of the applicant to move forward quickly. The issues have to be worked through, and some of them are just lengthy and complicated. So I think that is one of the benefits of the staging report, though, is that we do get that input from the development community and make sure that we're working and acknowledging those developers who are ready and are going to be willing and participants in the process, give staff the information they need, and to move forward in a timely manner.
Great. Thank you. Those are all the questions I had, so I will take the chair back. Not seeing any further discussion from committee, so did I have a mover and a seconder to receive? No. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. All in favor or opposed, and this is just receiving. That carries unanimously. It is 10 to noon, so I'm going to suggest that we continue with 11.3 and then is there another receive? Oh, okay, sorry. We received the staff presentation. Now we need to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. All in favor or opposed? I wrote over that line. That carries. Now we're on to item 11.3, municipal protected areas. Lauren Veritz is able to provide an overview. Councillor Nan, did you have something?
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. I just wanted to verify that the last two votes were tabulated, as I've been voting on the last two items while my camera was on.
We'll just double check.
I'll make a note and double check that for you, Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Did we want to receive a verbal update or overview on 11.3? Yes? Lauren?
Good morning. It's still morning, yes. Chair and members of committee. So the report before you today is for the Municipal Protected Areas Project and a response to the motion given at the September 13th Council for staff to present a report to this committee outlining the feasibility and resources required for the city to participate in the program. So I'm just going to give a little background on the project. So Canada has committed to achieving a target of protecting 30% of land and water bodies by the year 2030. And this target's often called the 30 by 30 target. And it comes from Canada's commitment to protection and enhancement of biodiversity at the 2022 United Nations Biodiversity Conference. And so to work towards this target, the Municipal Protected Areas Project has been initiated at a national level, being undertaken by Nature Canada, bringing together conservation partners like Ontario Nature, the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts, BC Nature, and the Wildlands League. And these partners are supporting municipalities across the country to determine how much of the publicly owned land in their jurisdiction can count toward the federal 30 by 30 target. So this work is funded by the federal government through the Environment and Climate Change Canada. And I just want to make a point of clarification that in the report, it was noted that the Greenbelt Foundation was paying for this initiative, but I just wanted to clarify that this initiative is being funded by the ECCC. And though Greenbelt Foundation has provided funding to Ontario Nature in the past for other projects. So Ontario Nature has encouraged the City of Hamilton to participate in the project since Hamilton has demonstrated a high commitment to biodiversity protection through the initiation of the Biodiversity Action Plan and being a signatory to the Montreal Pledge, Cities United in Action for Biodiversity. And so what Ontario Nature proposes to do is to work with city staff from planning and public works to review the city-owned lands in all of Hamilton, both urban and rural, to determine which lands may meet the criteria to be counted as a protected area or other effective area-based conservation measure. And so they've also offered to provide a review and feedback on existing policies and implementation measures for natural heritage that may be beneficial in informing the review of land use policies in the next phase of the municipal comprehensive review. They've also offered to provide some assistance with communication about the city's initiatives toward biodiversity protection and outreach about this particular project to celebrate the work that the city's been doing. And so to be considered as a protected area under the national target, the Ontario Nature uses four criteria. It has to be clearly defined with geographic boundaries. It has to have effective means to control activities that may negatively impact biodiversity. The protection needs to be long-term, year-round, and difficult to reverse, and needs to be managed by governing authorities so that outcomes can be achieved. So Ontario Nature will need access to property information and GIS data from the city to do the assessment work, and Public Works staff will take the lead on supporting with the initial review of the city-owned properties, and planning staff will be assisting with any review or interpretation of our existing land use policies. And then once the review is complete, any lands that meet the criteria will be able to be considered toward that federal target of 30%. And to add them, Ontario Nature needs consent from the city to release that data to the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks so that they can submit that to the federal government as part of the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database. So the recommendations of the report before you today are specifically just to move forward with the next steps of this initiative with Ontario Nature, and specifically that the PED staff and Public Works Department staff be authorized to provide the required data to Ontario Nature for the review and analysis, and to provide additional support through the project through the data analysis stage, and that the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development or their designate be granted authority to provide consent on behalf of the city for the Ontario Nature to release the findings of the Municipal Protected Areas Project to the province so that they can submit it for the toward the federal database. And then that Planning and Economic Development Department staff in consultation with Public Works staff also be directed to provide a final summary report at the end of the project to provide these results to Council. And so to close, I just want to thank the team at Ontario Nature for approaching the city to work on this initiative, and they've been very helpful meeting with staff and other elected officials to help us understand the project and the benefit toward the city. And that concludes my overview. It's just a direction to move forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and there's staff from Public Works on the call as well.
Thank you, Lauren. So I do have a couple speakers on the speakers list, but before we go to that, I think we're going to receive the written submissions, then we're going to put the report on the floor, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion. So just hold the speakers list there. So first, on receiving the written submissions, there are a number of written submissions on the agenda. I need a mover and a seconder to receive. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor McMeekin. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. And then a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report to put this on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Cassar. And on our speakers list, I have Councillor Cassar, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson. Councillor Cassar?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Danko. And thank you to staff, Lauren and everyone else that was involved for following through on this relatively quickly. I know there's so much on staff's workload, and they got this done on the time they committed, so thank you for that. And I just wanted to comment on this. This was a motion that I put forward, as Lauren mentioned, back in September. I believe unanimous support from my colleagues, so I appreciate that. And just a comment on the work here. This is about identifying lands that we already own and that can be protected permanently. I mean, I think that's a very basic step and a very simple step here with not a lot of staff involvement. So I think it's very easy for us to move forward with it, and then focus our work on the preservation of other lands. As we read in the letters that we just received, there is a strong push from the community to preserve our natural resources, wetlands and whatnot. I'm going to continue, and I know others will continue to push for that. coming back to today's report, I think it's a very simple task, base minimum that we can do, and continue to be a leader. As was mentioned in the opening comments, Hamilton has been a leader. So just encouraging my colleagues here to support this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Unspill that. But I just, again, want to echo Councillor Cassar's thanks to staff and to Ontario Nature for doing this work with our city. I think it's really exciting when external partners come in and start bringing in resources to help us set our goals. We don't even have a finalized biodiversity action plan yet, but because we've been so serious about where we're going, I think, and we've signed on to the Montreal plan, we've adopted some of these things as we're working on that biodiversity action plan, bringing it back, getting it going. Just really want to say so thankful that we've been able to plan and walk at the same time these efforts forward. I think it's what our community is asking for us when we declare an emergency, is to kind of walk and chew gum at the same time. That kind of get good things done while also looking at the bigger picture. And just, again, I think there's been so much excellence in our community from community members asking us to maybe set bigger targets or do more. And now's a really exciting time to work collaboratively on getting good things done. And so really excited for that. Fully supportive of these recommendations and really excited for this partnership.
Thank you, Councillor. It's not seeing any further speakers, so this is moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Cassar. I will go to the vote. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. So I'm going to suggest that we finish 11.4 and then we'll take a break. So 11.4 is Bill 150, Planning Statute Law Amendment Act 2023 and Official Plan Adjustments Act 2023. This is in relation to the City Hamilton Urban Boundary Reversal Commitment, whatever you want to call it. A mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report. Moved by Councillor Kretsch. Seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Any discussion on Bill 150 comments? Not seeing any. Councillor Tattison.
Can I just get a staff overview of that quickly?
Sure.
Through the chair, Charlie Toman, Program Lead, Policy Planning and Municipal Comprehensive Review. So the report today directly follows up on the report that Planning Committee received last month, respecting the announcement by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing that they were going to, quote, wind back the official plan modifications that the province made to OPA 167 to the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and Rural Hamilton Official Plan Amendment number 34. So what Bill 150 does is creates new legislation that would have the effect of rolling back all but 3 of the provincial modifications that the province made to Official Plan Amendment 167, and as detailed in staff's report, staff had already identified those 3 modifications as being something that staff support and council endorse as being kept in the official plan, as they were minor and did help provide additional clarification around the interpretation of provincial policy. The proposed legislation would also include transitional language related to the removal of those provincial mods, stating that they were that they would be deemed to have never been made. And the legislation also introduces limitations on legal action associated with the windback of official plan mods, as well as minister's zoning orders. So staff have prepared detailed comments on Bill 150, which are intended to be reviewed by by the province as a companion piece to the comments that that city staff prepared and the province or that the city council endorsed on the announcement. Sorry. Within Bill 150, staff found that the transitional language introduced still isn't clear exactly how it would impact development applications, planning applications that were received and approved within the last year while the provincial modifications have been in place. So staff are seeking clarification on that. In conclusion, staff are recommending that council adopt the comments in Appendix A, and that's the Director of Planning and Chief Planner be given authorization to submit those comments to the province before the posted deadline of December 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Councillor?
So thanks, Charlie, for that. So it's my understanding that there is a location that where in Hamilton secondary plans were filed. Is that correct? And is that the Upper West Side group?
Through the chair, that is correct. The city has recently received an official plan amendment application for a new secondary plan for the 20 Road West lands. That application is still being reviewed by staff for completeness, but obviously it would be impacted by this new legislation.
And so I think what you said is we still don't know what the process is for assessing the validity of that application then, correct? Is that what we're saying?
Through the chair, I'll start, and then perhaps my colleagues could add to it. So the Bill 150 includes language that the provincial modifications, including the provincial decision to expand the urban boundary, would be deemed to have never been made. And our interpretation is that the province is not looking to entertain applications that try to take advantage of that policy framework while it was in place. I'll defer to other staff as it may be more of a legal interpretation.
Okay.
Through the chair, Rachel McVean, Solicitor, Legal Services. Yes, so there is an application with respect to a secondary plan. Based on the proposed legislation for Bill 150, we do not yet have clarity on what the effect of that legislation will be or when it will come into effect. So currently, we do not have clarity on that I can provide at this time.
Just to clarify the public record, an application has been submitted. We are reviewing that application. It is an application for an official plan amendment to establish a secondary plan. Staff are currently assessing that application for completeness against the formal consultation document, and if it is not a complete application, it'll be deemed incomplete, and the materials will be returned to the applicant, and under the current legislative framework, they would have an opportunity to resubmit with the missing elements. Bill 150 is currently scheduled for third reading today before the House, so it's anticipated that notwithstanding when the minister initially said till December 7th to get comments, it looks like Bill 150 may get enacted before that December 7th date. No, but we have already provided comments both through the last planning committee reconfirming a firm urban boundary for the city of Hamilton, and in the legislation Bill 150, the minister is not contemplating any alterations to the city's urban boundary, save and except for what has been approved by council. There was a decision for a small parcel of land in Waterdown. That's why I wanted to point out. The legislation as it's currently drafted does not have any transition provisions in terms of grandfathering development applications that were in the works, which is very unusual. Traditionally, when the minister it brings in new planning legislation or new policies, they provide transition to grandfather those applications. So effectively, that would be an application that has been submitted. Once we roll the clock back to establish a secondary plan to an area where secondary plans are not permitted because it's in the rural area. It would be an urban boundary expansion required first, and the current policy framework would then be governed by the growth plan, which restricts the size of secondary plans or applications for urban boundary expansions. There is a provision in the Planning Act that says that council's decision on a urban boundary expansion is final and binding. So we're not sure ultimately, and that's why when we had those previous development applications submitted for the 20 Road West lands, they were never brought forward because we hadn't completed the assessment of the applications, then other matters played out at that point in time. So right now, although there is a submission to us for an official plan amendment, it is not being received by the city and it has no status until we make a determination complete or incomplete. And based on Bill 50 as it currently reads, those lands will then revert back to their rural designation, and that would then trigger the need for an urban boundary expansion application, and the application would essentially be returned to the applicant because it doesn't make sense to apply for a secondary plan for rural on rural lands. Notwithstanding that, ultimately, once the legislation is played out, we will have to sit down with our legal colleagues and determine, do we bring forward a quick denial, or do we just return it to the applicant, or how do we deal with that issue? Because there are a few things in flux. But at this point in time, other than someone hoping to apply for an official plan amendment, we have not accepted their application. And that'll be the first hurdle because there are deficiencies based on the preliminary review. Some of the materials that have been submitted to the city are stamped draft. They're not complete studies, or that there's missing elements within that work. So it would appear that there might have been a desire to try to get in front of the legislation for other purposes. And I anticipate across Ontario, there will be one or more legal actions brought forward. But we will advise committee and council of any developments once we make a determination on complete or incomplete. And then once we get that final decision, where the province moves on Bill 150 and how quickly they go from third reading to royal assent and proclamation to bring it in effect, because there's a whole series of bills that have been enacted in the last 2 weeks by the province that have gone through third reading, but they're holding off on that proclamation and royal assent component of the legislation. Sorry for a long answer. I hope I answered your questions on this matter. Thank you very much.
You're going to answer long. I'm going to ask short questions. Just any concerns or any ideas, like this property is inside the AEGD area, and we're developing the AEGD area, and development's supposed to pay for development. So if we leave this land rural, is there going to be a financial cost to the city in terms of putting that TMP in for the roads and so forth and all the sewer and infrastructure if it just stays rural?
Sorry, I think we're getting off topic for Bill 150, but if staff wants to provide a quick comment on that.
Through Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, development will proceed in accordance with the city's financial policies. So at this point in time, as you are correct, it's been identified that those lands are rural and outside of the urban area. Some of the adjacent lands are urban, so those developers will pay for their fair share of the infrastructure. Where there's rural area and there's no benefiting property owners, then that falls onto the city, onto the levy, as opposed to on the developers paying for the extension of the services. But cognizant of the urban-rural divide in the area. The infrastructure master plans and some of the road network changes are also reflective of that, and the timing of how what works are proceeding and what basis, and what will become the trigger then for upgrading some of the works, or whether it's the existing road network or the installation of new services. But that goes into some of those cost considerations. And also, if there are situations where services are extended, the city has in the past, or the developers have used other mechanisms to help recover their costs, i.e. there might be a 1-foot reserve adjacent to some of the properties that they own or boundary road conditions. We would have to be looking at all of those measures at the time of the installation or upgrade of any infrastructure.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for the latitude. I'm just trying to understand the process that's happening inside my ward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I will add that in particular, the 20 Road West Owners Group, it was their choice to have those lands removed from the urban boundary, and that was imposed by the Ontario Land Tribunal. Any further questions on Bill 150? Seeing none? Then do I have a mover and a seconder? Yes? Okay. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. So we're on 10.5, which 11.5, which has been withdrawn. Yes? So at this time, I'd suggest we take a break till 12:45. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Tattison. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. See you at 12:45. Hello, everyone. Resuming Planning Committee meeting for December 5th, 2023. We are on item 12.3 as items 12.1 and 12.2 were already approved. This is a motion for Toys for Tickets program. Councillor Kretsch, would you introduce your motion, please?
Sure thing. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. And this is an initiative, and I want to thank the Ward 2 team for doing the research on this and bringing this to my attention. I wasn't aware it was a program. They were in discussion with staff about this, or I think they mentioned it. And so staff are supportive of this idea, so I'm bringing it forward so that we can examine a project where parking fees would be paid for by Toys, and that therefore be it resolved is that staff examine existing Toys for Tickets programs in applicable municipalities and report back in Q2 2024 with recommendations of the possible implementation of a similar program in Hamilton in 2024. And the goal here is to provide an alternative payment method for a parking penalty where we can substitute a negative experience for a positive one. So that's the motion. Thanks to my seconder, Alex Wilson. It's on the floor for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any discussion on this? Councillor Wilson, please.
Just super quickly, I think there's it's a nice kind of sentimental activity as well. And I know a lot of staff in Ward 2 are really excited about this, but I do think it's something, that last whereas clause, changing out a negative experience for a potentially positive one, engaging with residents, having high levels of customer service. These are all term of council priorities. And I know it doesn't necessarily seem like the conventional way to build that goodwill, but excited to kind of have a innovative approach and all hands on deck to doing those improvements. And yeah, getting a ticket's not a fun experience when you're coming out to your car and getting it. We also have parking rules for a reason. And so I think helping people understand maybe during difficult times, yep, there was a violation, but there's other ways to make that happen that's more community minded. I think it's really exciting, and hopefully we'll get that report back and see what can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So no further speakers. All in favor or opposed?
I'm in favor.
And that carries unanimously. Item 12.4 is a motion demolition control bylaw exemption for affordable housing project at 1540 Upper Wentworth Avenue. Councillor Pauls, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, and I will read the motion because it says it all, and then I will just make a few comments. Thank you. I'll just go into my motion right now, and I'll read it. I need a seconder, so if anybody would like to second it. It's moved by myself, and I'll try to find a seconder.
Councillor Tattison's volunteering.
Thank you. Whereas Council at its meeting on July 22nd, 2022 approved Item 5 of the Planning Committee Report 22011 regarding report PED 222149 to facilitate the development of 126 affordable housing units located at 1540 Upper Wentworth Street. Whereas Council in its meeting on June 21st, 2023 approved the item 7 of the Emergency and Community Service Committee Report 23008 regarding report HS C2025A, Canada, Ontario Community Housing Initiative and Ontario Priority Housing Initiative Agreement 2023-2025. Whereas Council, as a result of the approval of Canada, Ontario Community Housing Initiative and Ontario Priority Housing Initiative, authorized and directed the General Manager of the Health and Safety Community Department, GM, to execute all auxiliary agreements and document as may be required to deliver the Canada Ontario Community Housing Initiative and the Ontario Priority Housing Initiative program. with content satisfactory to the GM and informed satisfaction to the city solicitor. Whereas the city as a service manager permitted the demolition of the 15 existing 15 units through report HSC 22038, whereas the tenants of the existing 15-unit tenants have been relocated by Kiwanis and the units are vacant, which is creating security concerns and additional security costs to Hamilton East Kiwanis Nonprofit Homes Incorporated. Kiwanis has conditional site plan approval and currently working through clearing of conditions with the anticipation of the construction of on the 126 affordable units will commence in the summer 2024. Yippee! The expenditure of the demolition permit can provide for an expedient construction timeline. So the motion says it all. We need affordable housing. I'm so excited. The Ward 7 is having an opportunity to demolish 15 townhouses and turn them into 124 units. These units are going to be great. We need to build them right away. And in the summer of 2024, they will be built, but we need the demolition right now. So I'm sure everybody approves that because we need affordable housing and geared to income housing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. So the motion's been moved and seconded. I'm not seeing any further discussion. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Item 12.5, demolition permit for 340 Weir Street North. Councillor Wang, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. The demolition permit is for 340 Weir Street North, and just a very quick synopsis of this. The existing building has been vacant and is in a state of extreme disrepair. It was actually back earlier this year that there was a massive leak or some sort of, but the whole point is that this building is now bowing out and it's actually a safety concern for the residents around it. So the therefore be resolved is that the Director of Licensing and Bylaw Services be authorized to contract Power Property Contracting, Inc., a one-time approval of $48,191 for the demolition of 340 Weir Street North, Hamilton, and that the cost be added to the tax roll. And B, that the Chief Building Official be authorized to issue a demolition permit for 340 Weir Street North, Hamilton, pursuant to Section 33 of the Planning Act as amended without having to comply with the conditions in subsection 6A of Demolition Control Area Bylaw 22-101. May I speak to it, Chair?
Please.
This has been an ongoing challenge for the neighbors of this building. It has caused a significant amount of anxiety, and because of the due diligence that our staff need in order to fulfill all of these requirements. I'm really thankful to staff for all of their hard work on this. My hope is that we can get this resolved as quickly as possible, but it is, the unfortunate aspect is that the owner is unable to take care of their building, and therefore this is the challenge, is that we have vacant units that are now in extreme disrepair that is becoming a safety concern for the rest of the city. So I hope that committee colleagues will seek favorably for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no one on the speakers list, moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. All in favor or opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you. No notices of motion Does the acting general manager have an update this afternoon?
Through Mr. Chairman, no, I do not, but Ms. Faybeck does have some information we wanted to share with the committee about the committee's accomplishments in 2023. Thank you.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you through the chair. So since this is our last planning committee meeting of 2023, I thought members of planning committee might be interested in a couple of statistics. I don't have a lot. If there's more statistics needed, I can certainly provide those. So in terms of the total number of units approved by the committee, and this goes back to the term of council, so November 2022 until including what was approved today, it's approximately 5,350 units. For those that are keeping track, the provincial target is for 2023 is 3,447, while we all understand that the measurements are not the same. If they were the same, we would be exceeding the provincial target in terms of what was approved. Just here at Planning Committee, it doesn't include any site plans or any other applications that are approved. So in terms of the total number of reports that came to Planning Committee in that timeframe, it's 202 reports, and 58 of those reports were statutory public meetings. So a lot of work that's come through Planning Committee, and certainly a lot of units. I think some of probably the highest number of units I think we've seen annually since I've been attending Planning Committee as the manager and the director previously. Thank you.
Thank you, and I really do appreciate that wrap up for the end of term. I think we all kind of had a sense of the workload that staff has been working under. We only see the very end of that, so definitely very much appreciate all the effort that's gone into that from every single member of our staff. It is no small task. The task, the work that you do on a daily basis. I think when we've talked about this before, I think some of our individual planners do more work on their own than an entire Ontario small town. So it is just an unbelievable amount of work, when we get to this level of application, and of course encouraging more going forward. So thank you so much for that update. All right, we're going to move on then. So I need to receive the acting chief planner's update, moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Tattison. That carries unanimously. On to private and confidential, we have items 15.1 through 15.4. I'm going to assume that we do wish to go in camera to discuss these, yes? So therefore I need a mover and a seconder to move into closed session for items 15.1, 15.2, 15.3, and 15.4 pursuant to subsection 9.3 subsections E, F, and K of the city's procedural bylaw 21-021 as amended, and section 2392 subsections E, F, and K of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Tattison. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Members of the public, the meeting will continue following the closed session portion of the meeting. When you see the members of committee rejoin, the committee will wait up to 5 minutes upon receiving upon reconvening in open session before proceeding with the meeting to provide members of the public and the media time to return. And also remind members of the committee or the committee that as per section 8.7 of the procedural bylaw, the use of personal electronic devices during closed meetings is prohibited. Somebody's like, no. Keep going. Okay. However, the use of city electronic devices during closed meetings are limited to text communications only, with the city's electronic devices not being used as a telephone, recording device, or camera. Staff from the office of the city clerk are exempted from subsection 8.171 when using electronic devices for record-keeping purposes. So we will now move into closed session.